Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Hi guys, Wade T. Lightheart here, and we're going to talk a lot about sleep today, and particularly how it is a skill. And I've got a great guest with us, Mollie, who's going to go into this in depth. She's an expert that helps people, coach people through all the options and nuances and develop a skill set that allows you to sleep great. I think you're going to enjoy this podcast. We're going to dive deep, so let's get into it ASAP. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we are going to talk about sleep, circadian rhythms, and how you can enter into entrainment around that. And we have today a great guest. We were chatting it up about all things traveling the world, supplement stacks, the key things, how to do a supplement on a bunch of different things we're going to get into today. But our guest today is none other than Mollie McGlocklin, okay, like the Glock. Nope, we're not going to shoot bullets at you, but we will have some golden nuggets for you. She is the creator of Sleep is a Skill and the host of the Sleep is a Skill podcast. Sleep is a Skill is a company that optimizes people's sleep through a unique blend of technology, accountability, and behavioral change. After navigating insomnia while traveling internationally, she created what she couldn't find, a place to go learn the skill set of sleep. With a background in behavioral change from the non-verbal group, she became fascinated with chronobiology, or chronobiology, depending on the pronunciation, and it's a practical application to sleep and overall experience of life. Knowing the difference between a life with sleep and without, she's now dedicated her life to sharing the forgotten skill of sleep. Mollie, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I know we were talking a little beforehand, and I'm clear that we're going to really have a good time on this conversation.
Okay, so I think one of the unique things that happened I'm going to tip my hand here a little bit for our listeners. I always say I'm from Tar Paper Shack, Canada, low income, rural, manual labor. You get up in the morning, you work a hard job all day long, you eat your dinner, and you pass out at night and you sleep well. And it's there's a rhythm to it.
Yes.
That was a long time ago. I was young a long time ago. I worked in that position. And through the decades ensuing in the health and fitness industry, I enjoyed great sleep and always have, and have been very fortunate. But the longer I've stayed in the industry, the more I see challenges around sleep. In fact, it's one of the leading complaints in the United States right now of poor sleep. All the evidence shows that Americans, particularly as a group, sleep less and sleep poorer than almost any other population in the world. And what's fascinating is it's one of the common complaints for young people who are integrated into the World Wide Web. And I always think back to that little part in the Matrix, in the early one in 1999, when he's up, Neo's up late at night and his computer starts talking to him essentially.
Yes.
And when he meets Trinity, she says, "No, now you know why you wonder late at night, what is the Matrix?" Right?
Yes.
And,
yes.
But what was interesting is that was like a precursor to a lot of people who live their lives online, who shift their circadian rhythm. And it seems like it's something that's influenced your life. Can you kind of expand and maybe lay the groundwork for why or how you ran into sleep problems, why you think that was, and then how are you able to extract yourself, or what's that story? And then we can kind of get into some of the other more detailed aspects of the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one, I relate to your upbringing. I actually grew up in Maine, in middle of nowhere, Maine.
I was right next to Maine, right?
Right.
So we're neighbors.
We're totally neighbors. And you know what that all looks like, that terrain looks like. And I was not on the coast, the lobsters and the pretty, kind of polos or what have you. It was inland, very far north, just woods. And you end the day at 4:30 when the sun's setting, a lot of alcohol, a lot of, unfortunately, economic struggles. And that was kind of what I grew up in. And it does relate to my story. And you definitely hit the nail on the head with this fascination with kind of chronobiology, circadian rhythm entrainment. But how they came to be was a hard one road, in that what it looked like for me, my story is really kind of a three-part element. So the first part of it is that I spent the first part of my life with a lot of fixed ideas about my sleep. I thought that I'm a night owl, I'm a short sleeper, it's in my genes. There was a lot of mental health issues in my family. And so trending towards anxious, overthinking, rumination. And so there was a lot of just like, oh, that's how it is for me. And let's see how we can kind of get through, maybe dive into, personal development, mind over matter. But the reality is I'm going to wake up, many, many days with insufficient sleep, 5.5 hours, 5 hours, whatever, and just pull myself up by my bootstraps. And that was kind of the thinking. And it was fixed in that particular way of being. And that went on in living in Manhattan as a serial entrepreneur, burning the candle at both ends, stressed to the gills, not noticing a number of kind of health signals that something wasn't right and how they were compounding as the years went by. I got shingles in my 20s, beginnings of an ulcer, a lot of signs that things were not something wasn't right. Right. And, but I didn't connect the element of sleep. And as an entrepreneur, I would be justified and righteous about it. And I would say, well, I make my own hours, so I'll go to bed later. I'll wake up later. It doesn't matter. I'll work on my schedule. And that's how it was for years. It was not until I went through my own period of insomnia while traveling internationally that all changed, and suddenly sleep became on the forefront. And it was kind of, no pass go before like figuring this out and handling this issue of sleep. And at some of my lowest points, there's many low points during that period. For some context, this was from a place of really severe kind of business stressors, just stress to the max, have employees that are responsible for, and really taking businesses on the road before they were ready. So from that place, like the stress that was there really manifested in this element of sleep. Now, at some of those lowest moments, one of them being I was in Croatia with Google Translate and go into, the doctors there, and I'm like, help, I can't sleep. And I leave with their version of Ambien. And in that moment, after having, come from that line of family that a lot of people ended up on different types of pharmaceuticals and what have you, it was a real sort of moment for me that, oh my God, I need to really get up under what's going on here, because it could very easily be a path where this is the new norm for me. And that was really frightening for me. So from a real fear place and like I have to figure this out place, that's what brought me down the rabbit hole of understanding everything I possibly could around sleep and how to, have more of a say in the results with my sleep. And what I discovered totally changed my life. So understanding more about this concept of chronobiology, which is really the science of time and how the timing of things can affect our health and biology. And in alignment with that, this concept that we can strengthen our circadian rhythm, just completely turned my habits and my life upside down. And so by virtue of that, as I began to bring back that level of homeostasis to my sleep and actually discover, oh my God, I can have sleep that I didn't even realize was possible for myself. It was outside of that identity I had created. Then I just could not stop talking about sleep. And so what ended up happening was just sort of organic. I started just working with people that were struggling, and then it grew and it went to, now we have weekly podcasts where we work with, sleep experts, learning more about that we can pull out from sleep optimization, weekly newsletter that we're at 190 editions of that. We're in hotels now, helping people optimize their sleep while traveling. We're working with UFC fighters, poker players, high performers, now aligned with different brands like Chili Pad and skin brands as far as, regeneration process and sleep. So this whole world got created out of really one of my lowest moments in my life to date. So I'm really grateful for what I discovered out of this topic of sleep and very excited to share more today.
Fascinating. The fact that so many successful entrepreneurs go through one of those moments, which is, the opportunity is kind of like some sort of colossal event.
Yes.
That I think, your path in life is often disguised as a massive obstacle. And it's usually dark and very scary. But the value of that, the beauty of that is it forces a pattern interrupt into the habitual ways of going. And, one of the things that I've noticed with people who've transcended a family pattern, let's say, is that their observation of the family pattern, which is somehow, just through nurture and evolutionary biology, is embedded in oneself. And one can see the consequences. And as they enter into that zone, there's kind of like a fork in the road. And in that fork means I'm either going to go down the direction that I already know and see, or I'm going to take this other road where I don't know where it ends and I don't know what the outcome is. And it looks like there's a lot of boogeymen down that dark forest road. But since I'd rather choose the unknown risk than go through the known risk, because maybe I can find another way. Before we get into the sleep, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think when it comes to sleep, you talked about there was some rationalizations, I guess,
yes,
built into your self-identification.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden you're at this point where you recognize that, well, that identity is going to destroy me and head down this path that I don't want to go down. Yet at the other part, you have to go through the shifting of that. What was that like for you? How long did it take?
Yeah, really good point. Because with people that we work with that sleep as a skill, it's one of the first things that we address are what are our labels around our sleep? So what are these labels that we've given ourselves and how can that become a self-fulfilling prophecy if we continue to keep those labels on ourselves and in our identity? And it's so huge. We know from a kind of supplement or drug perspective, the power of placebo and nocebo response. And so when we leverage that in ourselves and our construction of how we choose to see life, then those identities mean a lot. So for so many of those years, I was in this narrative that I was born into this way of being. This is how it is for me. It's, kind of almost coming from that generations back where we would hear so much buzz around chemical imbalances or, it's just kind of this biological wiring that we're
family.
Yes, runs our family, but something to be like kind of fearful of. And you really got to be in action to get whatever imbalance is going on handled. And you got to survive it. So that was kind of the original, that was how I was running through things. And I could, find little coping mechanisms and maybe read a nice book, but truly you're nailed into this way of being. So all those nice things that you might be adding in are just sort of, giving you nominal results. So it really did take a total shift in the creation of my identity as one. And I think part of that came from this concept of sleep being a skill. And so that's why we really underscore this concept so much, because unbeknownst to me, so many of the behavioral patterns that I was engaging in and the ways that I was managing my life in general were kind of at odds with what we know to make a difference with garnering great sleep night after night. So by going, and I tend to be quite the researcher mindset or get really in the weeds with some of these things. So to shift that perspective and realize, oh, I can learn strategies, methods, and really a whole paradigm shift, that started to change to now I'm a student of sleep versus just at the effect of sleep. So that was really part of that process. And it certainly took time. It still is there very much. It's never like, Well, I would argue that if you've dealt with periods of time with sleep anxiety, which is really what I was going through at certain periods, um, that it might still show up at certain periods. So if I travel a ton and my, jet lag and this and that, and I'm like, there's these moments, these knee jerk reactions of kind of that, we talked about the reptilian mind that, oh no, what if it happens again? What if I go through this insomnia period and all of that? And yet then you get to kind of examine those thoughts and come back and know that there are so many things that we can do to make a difference with that sleep, that the body wants great sleep. It's pulling for that. It's doing everything possible for that. And often we're the ones getting in the way.
Yeah, really well said, because I think anytime that you want to address a behavioral shift, right, you have to realize is there's a decision-making point and there's an identification point, which often now becomes the obstacle, and those things have to be. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are addressing that, because let's say you're dealing with poker players. Well, we have to be up all night.
Yes.
Right.
It's just how it is. We need more coffee, need more, modafinil. We need
more nootropics. I need whatever I need to get going, because we're on a roll right now and I got to keep the roll going, right? I'm in the groove. So, and also I think that is also very relevant to whatever rationalizations you might have around sleep, whether that's family commitments, work commitments, maybe, you're into social media, maybe the time zone that you happen to live in and who you're relating to, if you're a digital nomad entrepreneur, there's all kinds of things. And I got myself into trouble that way before as well.
Same. Yeah.
So all that to say, you've got this sleep as a skill. Let's break down, I would say sleep is a set of skills, maybe it would be right. So can you break down some of the things that you can quickly identify that are common elements for people who suffer from poor sleep, and what maybe the remedies might be for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, I would say that even from the beginning, often to make a difference with anything in life, any of these behaviors, we often have to know where we're at right now. So even developing a clear baseline and kind of metrics behind what are we really talking about? Because I've also seen clients, back to that kind of more of the psychological and mindset element that goes into sleep. I've seen clients come to me and they're sleeping 7.5 hours, and their HRV's really pretty solid baseline. And we've got heart rate at a pretty good space. We've got respiratory rate at a pretty good space, body temperature at a pretty good space, other elements that could lean to the quality of some of their sleep. And yet they say, I have the worst sleep ever. I'm exhausted. This is awful, yada, yada, yada. So how we are relating to these things is really important, but also like, what is the reality? And often they might not even know the reality until we start either one on a very low tech side of things, logging this. So, years back, if you would have gone to, kind of a sleep clinic or what have you, and discussed your difficulty with your sleep, you would have often been charged with tracking your sleep. So on the bare minimum, just tracking sleep diaries, sleep logs. The people that I work with all are wearing some sort of sleep tracker. We do right now have people wearing the Oura Ring in 2022, but then there's other things that we can bring in. And so from that place, establishing where we're at. And often that can bring about new insights, and people say, oh, I didn't even realize I was getting more sleep than I thought I was. Or there's patterns that we're seeing that, okay, I've got pretty decent sleep, or things that are working in some regard in certain parts of the week. And then other parts just go a mess when I socialize or what have you. So there's things that we can learn. So first, just getting clear on where we're at. And then from that place, we take a perspective of more this kind of circadian centric approach. So this circadian lens of how to bring about many of the things from behavioral shifts that we can do to improve our sleep. So what I mean by that is that every one of us has this circadian rhythm, this 24-hour rhythm that we're operating within. And as diurnal creatures, we're meant to be active during the day and at rest at night. And what we're looking to develop and to get a sense of, first off, is that there's a spectrum by which our circadian rhythm exists. And so there's the weak side and the strong side. And many of us are hanging out closer to the weak side So everything we're really looking to do is to start to move ourselves over to that strong side of the spectrum, and that there's so much from a behavioral standpoint that we can do. So from that place, if part of the problem is that this rhythm was really hardwired for over 90%, or some estimates even longer, of our human existence. And since so much of our time was spent as hunter gatherers, the timeline of our ancestors, that for so long we were living within nature and this was kind of handled. So my argument of sleep being a skill works now. And it might have been a little harder to make that argument if you go back to kind of hunter gatherer days, because we were just really forced to be living in alignment with these rhythms. And so everything that we're looking to do is really about using that as our blueprint and bringing that into our modern society, kind of having our cake and eating it too. So how can we develop a very clear 2-part system to our day? And this goes for shift workers or rotating shifts or what have you too. And they're even more important because of the deleterious effects of that. But so from that place, then discovering that there are certain cues that tell the body what time it is and what to be doing when. And we can go into some of those, but I'll just say real briefly that some of those cues, the most powerful one being light. And so that's the first top from this circadian kind of resetting process. So we go into the light element of things and figure out where that needs to go and when. Darkness is the flip side of that. So where that needs to go and when and to what degree. Temperature timing, where that goes and how we monitor and shift that. And then many things that will influence your body temperature are kind of nestled underneath that. So meal timing, exercise timing, meal type, exercise type, even thought timing. Now that one's a little interesting. And then of course, our drugs, different types of supplements or foods that can go into the drug category, and various things that we might be bringing in that could affect those very delicate rhythms. That's what we're looking to get up under.
Okay, great. So there's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot. Yes.
So there's a couple elements, I think. First and foremost, you kind of led with it, but we brushed over it just a little bit, that many of your sleep people are already using tracking technology.
Yes.
So let's back up to the person who just says, I feel tired all the time. Is part of the initial process getting data to correlate with biofeedback with the individual? Because as you said, they're not necessarily concordant, but oftentimes I would extrapolate from what you said that there is relevant points where you would want to maybe dive into one of the particular subsets of sleep in order to address that particular issue with that data. So you've got a composite of, let's say, 12, 15 different major factors in some sort of order that could be impacting sleep. And then you're trying to track as many of those as you can so that you can knock off the things that are influencing the most or positively or negatively. In other words, you do the things that influence the most positively, and you try to eliminate the things that distract from good sleep. Would that be accurate?
Yes, definitely. So we have this sort of ultimate checklist that we go through that is divvied up by some of those things that we know can influence sleep and that circadian rhythm topic, and kind of get a rundown of where some of the buckets that might be a bit more of a focus that we really want to kind of double down on and acknowledge and continue some of the things that they're doing that are working. We also want to do some screening for possible kind of red flags for other things that might be at play, meaning that very common one being elements of sleep apnea, obstructive breathing elements. So certainly you can be doing all of the things that I was just talking about around circadian rhythm entrainment. And yet if you, from an anatomical perspective, you are basically almost having this choking experience moment to moment throughout the course of your night, then that is obviously going to impact our results with our sleep. So we really want to do kind of a top-down approach and make sure that there's really nothing left unexplored from that could be influencing your sleep quality. And with those wearables, now we also want to do some education around wearables and what metrics can be helpful to pay attention to, and which I often see are bringing about some anxiety for people and are not even that accurate. So meaning that the wrist and hand-based trackers, unfortunately, the sleep stage classification is some of the least accurate data that is available there. And you'll even see, really reputable wellness professionals kind of talking about, oh, okay, I got my REM and I got my deep sleep and this and the other percentages, and which is fine. And appreciate the that it's bringing people into this conversation. And we just also, when it goes into the realm of that it's stressing us out, do know that those metrics are kind of our least accurate, so that there's others that we can get more information from. So we tend to hang out a bit more in the, for instance, HRV realm, since it is a metric of recovery that can give us some solid information about the quality of your sleep throughout the course of the night, heart rate and its kind of characteristics throughout the course of the night, body temperature, especially for people of menstruating age, that can be eye-opening, as well as respiratory rate, blood oxygen. So when we go into those, that can often give us a bit more say and awareness versus getting bogged down in some of the things that are just a bit more proprietary and still have more questions associated with them.
Awesome. So I'm going to kind of come back to this because I want to try and get some practical applications.
Yeah.
In cultivating a good sleep routine, what are, say, maybe the top few items that you think are essential to a good night's sleep?
Okay. So one of the things that I think can be problematic for people when dealing with issues with their sleep is when you start going to look for information around this, often some of the top things that come back are sleep hygiene tips, things to do at night, the, accoutrements to get, which are all well and good and fantastic. And if we are going into the realm where we're really disempowered around our sleep, and for some of us, I shared about that I was really verging into more the sleep anxiety realm of things, that when we are dealing with that, there's this hyperfixation. So you're actually having the reverse response that we're looking to cultivate, which is kind of a amping up of our arousal state before bed, which is not what we want to be garnering. So instead, we want to shift. And what I have people do is actually shift to the first thing that they do, the first thing in the morning. So it's kind of taking a paradigm shift from outside of the bedroom to how we're living our lives and how that impacts the quality of our sleep. And that can often be doubly beneficial, because then when we're working with people from that perspective, their life and their health is improving in general, which improves quality of sleep. And it's taking the fixation off of the sleep. So an analogy, I'm trying to remember. We had someone on the podcast that pulled this out, which I thought was great. But it was using the analogy of surfing, and the thinking that for surfing, there's certain things that you do to kind of prepare to have a great, experience in the water. And so you get you put on your gear, you maybe search about like what areas are going to be the good waves, and you go to the place and you look at the weather and you do all these things. But then once you get out into the water, it's sort of just like waiting for the waves to come and just sort of being present with all the other work that you did. So that's really what we're trying to do with sleep versus forcing sleep, which often is a failing strategy. So what can we do first thing in the morning? And this goes back to that circadian rhythm entrainment. So the very first thing, if you get nothing out of what I'm saying, my hope is that you get that the first thing you can do is getting outside and getting that morning sunlight. More and more people are hearing about this. And I just want to take a second to underscore the importance of this one and the practicalities of what this looks like. So when you first wake up, you're looking to kind of butt as closely as possible to that wake up time, to the first shot of that morning sunlight that you can get. It's known as sunlight anchoring. And it's called sunlight anchoring because you're looking to anchor your day with that bright kind of elements of sunlight and the full spectrum light that is available in the sun. And so some people might hear this and say, next topic, please. I stand in front of the windows. I get plenty of sun. I turn on the lights in my space. That's fine. And unfortunately, that really doesn't handle it, because in certain studies, we find that it can take anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer to reset your master clock, known as your suprachiasmatic nucleus, from behind a window than it does when you actually get outside. And so I encourage people to really toss away where possible their sunglasses. Now, of course, safety, when you're driving or where needed, but when possible and when it's within your abilities, taking off those sunglasses throughout the entire course of the day, to really get that sunlight in your eyes, because the eyes are directly connected to that suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that is going to do that resetting process. And that actually tells the body when to get tired later. We use this with poker players because sometimes they have variable schedules. And so for them, they might actually strategically want to get tired later. So if that's the case, we delay when they're getting that morning sunlight so that from a strategy perspective, they will be more alert later on to the evening. So there's a very clear cause and effect with this.
Quick question on that. What about people who wear contact lenses? Because oftentimes they have, it blocks light, right? So it's
yes. So now this is a controversial one. Different studies and spokespeople on this kind of conversation will have varying thoughts. So one thinking that by virtue of the way that the contacts are structured, that it's actually focusing in the light inward. So that's one theory. But another theory being concerned that could be blocking some of that light. So from that place, then you can experiment with both. But certainly if you can get out there without contacts and without glasses, even to the clear glasses, then that can make a lot of sense, because everything that we're looking to do is to really harness the power of that light into the eyes in particular. And beyond the eyes, then we're also looking to harness the power of vitamin D. And so if vitamin D is this precursor to serotonin, which is a precursor to melatonin, we're looking to make sure that all of those things are aligned. So that gets into geographical wellness. So where you are on the globe impacting your well-being. And we know that there are certain health implications and sleep implications by where you choose to live on the globe. So some of those northern latitude locations, you really want to listen to this conversation even more, versus I'll have a lot of people say, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me because half throughout the winter, there's barely any sun. So, I guess I'll just get a sun lamp or what have you. That actually means that you need to spend more time outside, and maybe even if so this is more dramatic, but if you can even find ways to relocate into more southern latitudes from a health perspective, could be beneficial. But if that's not in the cards, then really prioritizing spending that time outside. Worst case, if that is not in your power, things like the Spurdy lamp can be helpful. Now, those are ones that some people can even get covered with prescription, because that will shown to help generate vitamin D from a lamp, which not many of them are doing. So those can be some kind of band-aids, but you really do want to see how you can make the sun element a part of your day for that first half, and then sprinkled throughout the rest of your day, because we're looking to have a high amplitude of sunlight throughout the day, and then shifting over to bringing the ratio down, which brings us into darkness timing, bringing that dramatically down, ideally being present for sunset, because that brings about a whole other set of cues for that suprachiasmatic nucleus to say, okay, now we're going to transition into the second half of the night, inoculate ourselves for some of the deleterious effects of blue light that come about into the evening by virtue of having that infrared light present. So then you can start going into very dim lights. There's really cool studies out of NASA looking at this. And they've even used candle lights, oddly, where they'll find that just by having candlelight in your evening environment seems to uptick the amount of melatonin production that you're naturally producing in the evenings. So these strategies, while they can seem like basic or soft, when you really get into the practicalities of them, it can be really life-changing. And on the front end, it just takes a little bit of time. You got to change your light bulbs. You got to maybe bring in the red lights, the candles, the Himalayan salt lamps, all of those sort of things on the front end, but that can be transformative in and of itself.
Got it. Okay. Any other key elements in the sleep skill stratosphere that we haven't covered?
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's masszymes.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Yes, a ton. But I would say that underneath, so we have light, we have darkness. Underneath that is that temperature. So even just from an ambient temperature perspective, and if we're using that blueprint of kind of how our hunter-gatherers would have run their days, then we're looking to mimic that. So what that would have looked like for them, they're sleeping outside in nature on the ground, the sun is rising, and by virtue of the sun and the light being present, there's also a rise in temperature in the environment. So those two things have always gone hand in hand. And then when the sun would set, then there would be a really dramatic cooling off. And I think anyone that's been on the beach or what have you has experienced how suddenly it can go from nice and warm to then the sun goes down and then you're freezing. So that is what we're looking to really mimic even in our modern society. And, part of why this is so important is back in 2001, the EPA did a study where they found that the average person was spending 93% of their days inside, including an indoor environment and their automobiles. So only 7% of their entire lives being spent outside. And that's before a pandemic, before chronic use of smartphones, laptops, what have you. So from that place, since we're pretty much being like zoo animals indoors, then we have to take the steps to mimic what would it be like outside. And do know that in the future, a lot of the tech for smart homes will be automatically doing this. But until we get to that point, we need to do this ourselves. So you would turn up your ambient temperature during the day if you have that capability in your space. And then in the evening, right around when sunset is happening, you're aiming to also lower that temperature in your environment. And then more than a lot of people realize, lower the temperature in the evening. Recommendations between 60 to 67 degrees in the evening for sleep. And then also even looking at what your sleep environment might be, is that being overly insulating? So bringing in things like cooling mattress pads or other things that can help support getting to that really cooler level. Because if you think again, the blueprint was laying on the ground, and that would have been some of the coolest spot that you could be in. So the thinking with cooling mattress pad, it's not just like, oh, a cool gadget. It's actually meaning to kind of mimic how things would have been in our natural environment.
I see. Very good. So let's talk another topic that comes up, and they're related, but they're different, and that's drugs and supplements that people use. I don't know what the numbers are in North America, but prescription medication for sleep is just scaling completely out of control with a variety of side effects. Then there is the use of melatonin, and I would say the abuse of melatonin and the side effects of chronic abuse. And then there's a growing array of supplements that are designed to address potential adjuncts to sleep, right? That's ways to, assist in sleeping or address, deficiencies which could be contributing to an inability to sleep. What's your experience around those areas, and what are some points that might be point out for people who are struggling with sleep?
Yeah, great question. So one, I think this is where this element of tracking and awareness come into play, so that we can really be strong sort of detectives in seeing what's working and what's not working, meaning that the more body of information we have, so everyone we're working with is wearing particular wearables. So once we introduce certain supplements, or if they're coming at things from a place of having taken prescription drugs, we can also see what the effects are with both of those. And that also gets into, from the chronopharmacological perspective, the timing of drugs and the types of drugs. That also brings in things like very common drugs like caffeine and alcohol, THC, some of these things that can really mess with sleep. So we want to first have that kind of baseline established, and then strategically introduce things, ideally at on their own. Now, I often myself can be really, really bad at this, where I'll often bring in 9 million new things. And then it can be challenging to see what is working and what's not working. And especially from that bio-individual perspective, we do want to avoid that kind of shiny object syndrome and strategically bring and introduce these things for an extended period of time. Some things needing a little bit more time, like for instance, CBD is one that you might want to take a little bit more time than just, a short kind of look at the effects of this, and various other, supplements can be similar. To your point around prescription drugs, this is something where we absolutely want to do our due diligence, because both the benzodiazepine group, I see a lot of people coming through dealing with difficulties with their sleep from long-term use of those drugs. Hypnotics being another kind of grouping that can also be concerning for the from a long-term perspective. Again, the label use of these are meant to really be more short-term, but unfortunately we'll find people using these.
Benzos are, I mean, if you look at the data,
yes,
the nature and the destructive, I cannot believe that doctors can prescribe these under the Hippocratic Oath in a lot of, and that's an opinion, folks. I'm not a medical doctor, but
yes.
One can just look at the, Dr. Jordan Peterson.
I know.
Who is a very intelligent and well thoughtful person, just, took some benzos for an anxiety and sleep disorder that he was experiencing related to it, and literally almost lost his life because of an addiction. And then he started diving into the data, and then it's like, and this is a person that can crunch data and is, I think, capable of determining meta-analysis. And he makes a very compelling case that benzos should not be prescribed at level, yet it's one of the most prescribed drugs that are out there for people related to sleep and anxiety. And they kind of correlate.
Yes, you hit, and again, I appreciate your call out, not medical advice, anything that we're discussing here. And from a topic perspective, this is one that's very near and dear to my heart. I've had family members that have literally become, their experience of life have become different people by virtue of decades of being on some of these drugs. I see a lot of clients coming my way that are in complete panic, and we have to work responsibly with, psychiatrists and what have you, depending on the dosage and length of time. And because these can be very, very severe, when you're getting off of these, some of the withdrawal process. We did one of our most listened to podcasts was with Dr. Ellen Vora, who stands as a kind of holistic psychiatrist out of Manhattan, and really making the argument for kind of bringing more and more awareness of what she will often see as damning effects from this long-term use and abuse of benzodiazepines in particular, but then also bridging into things like hypnotics. Now, those have improved, I guess you could say, from a spectrum, so from the severity, but also they bring about their own host of issues and problems. And then both of those groups, what we often see are something called Rebound insomnia and rebound anxiety. So do know that we want to do as much work as possible before going into that space of those prescriptions, because often the very same issues that you had when you started taking it, you can expect to have those again, and then amplified when you're getting off of these things, which is just really alarming. And I really think the same way we saw, what's that very popular Netflix show where they are documentary where they went deep on the opioid crisis. I really truly believe that there's a need to explore this benzodiazepine, what I think crisis, but it's kind of this quiet, subdued crisis and sedated crisis that people just continue to have. Many people, it looks like for the rest of their lives, they're taking these things and then just going up on the dosage. And the concern with that with sleep is that that sedation doesn't equal great sleep, and sedation affects the quality of the sleep stages that we're able to get into. So the deep sleep and REM states that we're able to get into. So even in the withdrawal process, there's a whole element that people can often go through where suddenly they might be having way more REM and different stages that they're going into that they weren't used to beforehand, because the brain has sort of been starved of those states up until that point. So it's a really, I mean, you could spend multiple podcasts just on that one topic alone, but it's a big one.
So it would seem, though, from the avoidance standpoint, the big disruptors, any stimulating drug, speed, cocaine, tobacco, caffeine, what other stimulants on the stimulant side that could be?
Yeah, we'll see Adderall can be another one.
Right, any of the
nootropics. Yeah.
Nootropics, modafinil, these hyper-focused stimulation drugs that people use for intensity focus, whatever, partying, who knows.
Right.
So that's one category of disruptors, I would say. And then we have maybe things that people, then there's the pharmaceutical prescriptions, which you just covered a couple of them in there. But let's move over to the supplement side with things like magnesium, melatonin, THC, and CBD, because they can enhance it, but they can also take away from it if not used properly. Maybe you can break down those 4 items, since they're common topics that I think people are turning to in a shotgun type format, and then you might have some insight of how to apply those, or what might be appropriate and what might be not, or which ones you would engage in.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I will say one thing I think is really important too from a supplement perspective is ideally working with a functional medicine doctor, what have you, to test and be aware of what are the things that you are really struggling with, having those clear deficiencies in, and supplementing from that place. Also ensuring that we're not supplementing out of the gate from a collection of poor behaviors that are just gonna disrupt any benefit that might be coming from these supplements. So meaning what we aim to do is spend weeks and weeks really looking at changing some of these behaviors first and foremost, so that we can start to naturally shift from a hormonal perspective, some of the changes that can be done with sleep from that behavior standpoint, and then start to layer in some of these supplements. So now, as I'm speaking about supplements, meaning from a blanket perspective, a devoid of bioindividuality for what people might be dealing with on their own, then one of the more blanket ones that we're comfortable often sharing being magnesium, and certainly seeming to have such a high percentage of deficiency for people with magnesium, just based in, the problems with our soil production, stressors, toxins, a number of things. So from that place, then bringing in different types of magnesium seems to be quite helpful for people, both topically and internally. So that's one that we often lean into. And then on the melatonin side of things, then that one is one that's also very controversial. We aim to produce as much naturally of that melatonin as we possibly can, and then ideally keeping that for specific issues that we might be dealing with. So whether lots of travel, variability, jet lag, changes in sleep timing, things of that nature, or if you're dealing with specific sleep disorders. And then for some people, there might be certain kind of cases where it makes sense to use melatonin. Now, this is controversial because some people do subscribe to more of the high dose melatonin, or using melatonin during the day. So that's more of a layered topic. But we aim to do as much as we can behaviorally first. And then the THC CBD topic. Now that one's really fascinating. And there seems to be a lot of beneficial kind of signs and cues that look that CBD might be really helpful for overall one, lowering of anxiety, which many of the people I'm working with might be dealing with kind of a higher uptick in that in particular. So helping with the anxiety element that could play a role in sleep, but also helping to address that endocannabinoid system without going into that kind of psychoactive state like THC. So more often what we see is that when people are having a lot of THC leading up into the night as by means to help with sleep onset, then often we will see more deleterious effects, unfortunately, with their sleep, depending on the dose and depending on the ratio. And so it's very, very important to kind of get in the weeds on that, because it doesn't mean that it can't be an incredibly useful approach, and especially for pain management. And if it's kind of the lesser of, if we're looking up against getting prescription pain medication or getting something like THC, often that can be really, really helpful for people and bring a lot of relief. So it does depend on your case. But there are a lot of times when I see people chronically using THC in particular, that once they remove or lessen that, then we might see some improvements in their sleep.
Great stuff. So let's go a little bit into your practice. You have a website, it's called sleepisaskill.com. You got a newsletter, you got a podcast where you're talking about these kind of things. Someone says, you know what, I've tried a bunch of these things. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm still struggling with sleep. It's disrupting my life, my health, my vitality, these type of things. I'm going to give Mollie a call and see if I can get this sorted out, or text her or email her, whatever that is.
Yeah.
What is the kind of process that you walk people through, and what makes that, say, maybe unique and thorough to really get someone for that? You mentioned behavioral change.
Yeah.
How do you implement that? What's the process and how does that work for people?
Sure. Yeah. So when people are really at that point when they're ready to commit to improving their sleep, what we do is we have a 90-day process. So we have a 90-day course. So we really aim to bring about a high degree of accountability. So we have both one-on-one options and cohort models, but all of them, they're wearing, again, in 2022, an Oura ring, so that there is that kind of Hawthorne effect or observer effect, so that they feel like they're being sort of watched or in the game, but not from a place of stressing them out. Never want to bring stress into the realm of sleep, but instead just like that we are present and aware of, are we hitting some of these goals that we're looking to create? And so what I mean by the goals is that in the first 2 weeks of the 90-day kind of course that we're going through, those first 2 weeks are about, one, getting clear of that baseline, getting clear on all of the things that we've been, that are both working and not working in our sleep. We also bring in something called a framework called the sleep tripod. So having workability between psychology, physiology, and environment. And so kind of going down the rung and seeing what might be out of alignment there. Also screening for things like that sleep apnea and having people work with people for that in particular, because that can often be life-changing for their sleep too. Then in the second week, what we're doing is more education based. So if the first week is about kind of getting clear about where we are and getting clear on our why to do this, because for any behavioral shift, you also want to have very clear intentions with what you're going to be bringing in, because otherwise it gets hard. And then you want to just go out and have your drinks and have your coffee and whatever, and it can all go out the window. So we have to be really committed on this. So that's that first part. We're also taking pictures and videos of our sleep environment, not just the bedroom, but even the environment leading up to sleep and the hours before sleep, and seeing what that can, how we can optimize there. In the second week, we're looking at creating their circadian crafted day. So their circadian crafted day is really getting, really doing some like looking at our lives, and from more of a life kind of design perspective, seeing how would I want to design my life in a way that inspires me, so that I would be getting up around 7 days a week at the same time is really what our goals are. And what would inspire me to do that versus feeling like, oh, now I got to do this thing with this sleep thing. Instead, like, no, this isn't so inspiring. I rise with the sun or whatever it works out for that person. And then they do that consistently. So on that circadian crafted day, they see when they're waking up, when they're getting their sunlight, what time are they getting the caffeine element of things? When are they getting their movement in, which will also raise up their bodily temperature, which plays into what we talked about, temperature timing. When are they eating? So metabolic jet lag is a thing where if you're kind of delaying and starting your meal timing all over the place and day and night, that can also give another kind of jet lag like symptom. So you're looking to have a bit more consistency there. And then from that place, then you're looking to see what are the ways that you can build in some kind of recovery elements of things, winding down and going into the evening. And then once we've got a clear game plan, then we're sort of pressing go and doing daily check-ins on our platform, where people are kind of going through what are they discovering now that they have this education framework by all these things that can affect sleep. What are they starting to find? Oh, wow, ate really late last night and now my heart rate was so much higher. My HRV was lower. The ice cream didn't work, but the, the raw honey or whatever, some of these things maybe did. All of these things so that now we start to have such clear awareness and not to build a thing of being, hyper vigilant or neurotic. Instead, we're looking to have this awareness so that over time, these are just become natural tools that we know how to yield. And that when we get off course, which we all will, and there's always going to be times when travel, friends, family, whatever, stress, and then how can we with velocity bring ourselves back on track? So those are some of the things that we really deal with together, as well as just really starting to see that these things are all dynamic. So we might lay out this great plan and then in practical application discover, oh, you know what, actually, I want to move the workout timing to another time. I need a little bit more space in my evening to really wind down. I'm dealing with a lot of stress. And so that kind of hyper aroused brain state, all of these things can be manipulated and shifted, and that can give you, the life of your dreams, which is really what we're going after, because we're really the Trojan horse effect of this is by virtue of improving your sleep, you're actually improving your life.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. So when someone engages in that, what is a realistic time frame to kind of go through this process and come out the other side and see measurable, definable, and experiential improvements in one's sleep?
Yeah, really good call. So out of the 90 days process where we absolutely are delivering on those clear tools and behavioral shifts. Now, I will say that depending on if some people might be coming in, kind of like with a gym, that if some people are coming in and they've had years and years of inactivity and things that aren't working in their health, their track might look very different than the person that's already been an athlete and what have you. And they just need a little bit of a tune up. So those things can look very different, but regardless, there's absolutely no reason why within 90 days, by enacting some of these things, that we shouldn't be able to see measurable shifts. And that's really what's so empowering, because then we can see like the before and point to an objective space what something was at before they actually made changes in their health, which brings us back into the driver's seat of our sleep versus just sort of being at the effect of or hoping, wishing, all of that.
Very good. Mollie, where can people find out about you, develop maybe some better habits, and perhaps hire you and your team in order to address their sleep issues?
Sure. Yeah. So at sleepasaskill.com, it kind of acts as a bucket for all kinds of things. So first off, you can take a sleep assessment and get, kind of tailored information and resources backed based on what you're dealing with your sleep. You can sign up for our weekly podcast, and you can also sign up for a weekly newsletter. We really encourage everyone, no matter where you're at, to at least get the newsletter, because we really put a lot into that, from, just free content for also, I mean, I'm pretty nerdy, so I think that this is fun, but a fun perspective where they will have lots of charts and graphs of different experiments that people are doing too, and different clients that we've worked with, different small groups where we've seen really marked improvements in particular things and noteworthy things. So just yesterday, our newsletter went out with a client that had lymphoma and went through, the treatment process and was tracking it the whole time with the Oura Ring. And we got to see some of the results of that, what that looked like, how that affected sleep, and then a positive change on the other side of that. Things where people they did one thing where they stopped eating ice cream at night, and how that just transformed a lot of their stats. Interesting, noteworthy things that we can all do to improve our sleep. And then if you are really, really struggling with your sleep, then certainly we have options available too for those 90-day courses, both one-on-one and the small group cohorts, as well as kind of resources for optimizing your bedroom space, like downloadable PDFs and things of that nature.
Excellent. This has been super informative, but I know we only scratched the surface of your knowledge well. It's such an important topic and a very product. So I encourage people to come check out. Any last things you'd like to share with our listeners, or things that they might consider in regards to sleep?
Yeah, the last thing I think I would say is just really imbibing or taking on and just trying on this concept that sleep is a skill, because I think from that place, and you can make the argument that just about anything could be a skill. And so by shifting that paradigm and by going into kind of that student identity, this can really help us kind of bring a clean slate to the thing that we do every single night, and really become a fascinating endeavor that can empower both certainly our nighttime sleep results, but also the results of our life. Because I know we didn't get into all the benefits. I mentioned some of the poor effects, but the benefits, I mean, I often say I'm now addicted to feeling good. And so from being addicted to feeling good, then it makes us more willing to do some of the things that might keep us on that same track. So maybe we skip the extra cup of coffee, or we, have a little bit less of the wine, or what have you, all of these things, because on the other side of that we get the benefits of emotional regulation, more controlled glucose levels. We have better overall long-term health effects. There's studies coming out around sleep deprivation and Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, possible correlations, so many things that we can help to support our overall sleep by becoming a kind of student of sleep.
Well said. Super exciting. We'll have to probably bring you back another time to kind of dive into some specific elements. For those who like this podcast, I would encourage you to check out sleepisaskill.com. And of course, sleepisaskill.com/podcast, where Mollie will dive into all things sleep related, including the benefits. I think most of people who struggle with sleep recognize that there's an aspect of life that they're missing out, and long-term effects of not sleeping well are pretty well documented about the development of a variety of different conditions that are compromise your life. So thanks so much for joining us today, Mollie. I really appreciate it. It was super cool. And it's always a delight when someone knows so much about a topic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And for all our listeners, if you like this, smash the like button, share it with a friend, someone struggling with sleep. And of course, refer them out to Mollie. I think she can probably help solve whatever that problem is in a holistic, healthy manner that will have you feeling your best in a short period of time. I'm Wade Lightheart from Bioptimizers. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Awesome Health Podcast. I hope to see you on the next one real soon.
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.